it's me, Sam B. While we have a lot to be grateful for in this country, we also have some strongly worded suggestions about things that could change, from downright discriminatory policies to the fact that Columbus Day is still a thing. America has some room for improvement. If your least favorite Thanksgiving guest starts talking about how America has moved past racism, here are some segments from our show that you can show them.
In 1492, the brave explorer Christopher Columbus brought civilization and enlightenment to the New World.
That is so false. That's completely false.
Okay, how about this? Columbus, a charming goofball who whoopsied his way into discovering America and...
That's also false.
Okay, let's try this. Columbus, yes, mistakes were made, but there were more positives than negatives, and he wasn't a bad guy, and...
He was a terrible guy.
Oh, God. I take it that this is going to be one of those painful but necessary conversations, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay then. Full Frontal presents the painful but necessary discussion of why we should replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Spoiler alert, he was a total...
As Americans, we have an obligation to know our full history of our country.
This is Representative Deb Haaland from New Mexico. Her 2019 win was historic because until now, no Native American woman had ever been elected to Congress. And she's one of the leaders fighting to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. I imagine it must be exhausting for you to have to explain to people over and over about why we should call it Indigenous Peoples Day.
Sure. I mean, it's 2019. Maybe we shouldn't have to be explaining that any longer, right?
Right. So why should we call it Indigenous Peoples Day?
Well, if we're truly wanting to celebrate the progress that we've made in this country, then Indigenous Peoples Day is completely fitting because we were meant to be completely either killed off or assimilated into mainstream society. And we're still here.
Native American contributions are vast, from brave World War II code talkers to our current poet laureate. Native Americans introduced foods we eat every day. They played essential roles in the environmental movement, and they created what is ironically our whitest sport. And unlike some non-American white guy who didn't even discover America and is also dead, there are 6.8 million Native American citizens who are very much alive.
We're still standing our ground and fighting for the things that we deserve. And if that's not a story of resilience, I don't know what is.
If we get rid of Columbus Day, what will happen to the tradition of, what do you do on Columbus Day? Is it the one with the trees? Or is that the one where you eat challah?
You don't. You sleep in and you get a day off.
The tradition of sleeping in and getting a day off. Or...
You can still sleep in and get a day off.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a good selling point. But some people aren't buying it.
Can you imagine doing away with Columbus Day in New York State?
Absolutely not. I don't think most people know what Indigenous peoples means.
Happy Columbus Day anyway. Enjoy it while you can. Your grandchildren won't even know it existed. Does your average protester know anything about Christopher Columbus?
Not sure. But if your average Fox viewer did, they'd probably hate him too. So let's put Columbus's arrival in terms that might resonate with them. Let's say a bunch of typical melanin-deficient dude bros are having a Sunday afternoon football party. Then...
What's up? This is my party now.
But it wasn't. But they welcomed him anyways.
Oh, hi.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, hi.
Two things. First, this party, it wasn't even in North America. Columbus never made it here. Second, he thought he was in India.
Is this 523 India Street?
No, dude, this is 45 Caribbean Way. I think you got the wrong spot.
But as the Beer Cozy says, if you're at the wrong party, forcibly convert everyone to Christianity from their existing religion. Here, represented by football.
Football? Lame. Let me bring you some culture. Me doing CrossFit.
No, dude, we were watching that, actually.
Oh. You like that? Look at that.
God, CrossFit sucks.
So does imposing Jesus stuff.
I call that planting the flag.
And that's the story of Columbus.
No, there was genocide committed against them. They were killed off with disease and massacre.
Okay, minor addendum. Columbus brought smallpox.
This beer tastes funny, man.
He also brought over 22 other new diseases that wiped out hundreds of thousands of people. Worse, he enslaved the indigenous population almost immediately.
You're never going home. Good news is I brought both kinds of music. Smash Mouth and Creed.
No, I think the actual history is much more horrific than what you've just described to me.
Okay, let's just rip off the Band-Aid. Columbus turned a lovely Sunday afternoon into a 90s rave from hell. Between the disease and a bloody, prolonged massacre, 95% of the population was wiped out. He paraded dismembered bodies through the streets. He trafficked women and children. His men held beheading contests. They stole infants from their mothers.
Can we cut?
What's the problem?
He's a f***ing monster.
I thought that you knew that he's a genocidal maniac.
No, I was raised white.
It was very sad and tortuous history that a lot of people don't think twice about.
Look, you've convinced me. I am on board. I think we should cancel Columbus. I think we should erase it from history.
Well, you can't say it didn't happen, though. It's something that we should never forget. We should learn about it as Americans. We need to know all of our history.
She's right. We can't erase history. So we here at Full Frontal set out to placate those who still want to honor the shittiness of Columbus. And what better way than to permanently memorialize him inside what the New York Daily News ranked the worst bar bathroom in New York City. So visit the Greenwich Treehouse Bar and the newly christened Christopher Columbus Crappour, a fitting tribute to the true history of our nation's first genocide. While you're there, or frankly at any terrible bathroom across the country, take a hashtag #CrappyColumbus selfie. Tag us and your representative. We have a whole year to let politicians know Columbus sucks and to support Indigenous Peoples Day.
It's been 2 years since the Me Too movement sparked a trash fire that's still burning Matt Lauer's pubes. So I sat down with Tarana Burke, the woman who founded the movement, to find out how far we've come.
So many movements start with good intentions and then get distorted. Like how high-waisted jeans are meant to make your legs look long, but instead they make your crotch look long. How has the Me Too movement been distorted?
What most people think Me Too is so far from what we actually are, which is a movement to support survivors and to end sexual violence. The way we define it is as a public health crisis. There were 12 million people who responded to the hashtag in 24 hours. Imagine if we woke up tomorrow and 12 million people came forward and said they had some rare disease. Our whole world would stop.
The 2-year anniversary of the Me Too hashtag was just a couple of weeks ago. Have you gotten a lot of media requests?
Tons of media requests, lots of them that I turned down because so many of them wanted me to talk about what the road back was for the men who had been accused in the last 2 years.
Is there a pathway back for the journalists who keep asking you those questions?
Right. How about you talk to some of the women who came forward? The Me Too movement has been built on the backs of survivors. And we're like, thanks. And then we throw them away. We should be thanking survivors and the people who support this movement.
Oh my God, you're so right. We should be thanking these people. You know what I could do? I could throw them a lovely autumnal meal. I'm gonna call it Sam's Food Day of Gratitude. It's perfect.
No, that's already a thing.
We could make a pie out of pumpkins. What?
That's already a holiday.
I'm gonna kill a bird.
Introducing Sam's Food Day of Gratitude, a special holiday where we make a feast and give thanks to the people who made the Me Too movement possible. Of the many turkeys available, I chose 3 and prepared them in the traditional style. Harvey Weinstein, watch out potted plants. Bill O'Reilly, the other white meat. And of course, Mario Batali. I had some really special guests. Megan Twohey and Jodi Kantor, the reporters who exposed the Weinstein scandal, Chanel Miller, author of Know My Name, and June Barrett, an organizer for domestic workers. This was going to be the best Sam's Food Day ever!
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your amazing work. What do you think that the successes of the Me Too movement have been so far?
Remember that before the Weinstein story was published, we had no idea what was going to happen. A few nights before the story came out, we looked at each other and we just said, is anybody going to care? And I think that one thing we have all felt in the last 2 years is the incredible potential for these stories to matter more than any of us have ever dreamed.
Yes, women's voices do matter as long as they're not too shrill. Sorry.
And for many survivors of sexual assault, reclaiming their narrative is essential.
When I released my statement, my anonymity was protected. And I felt like that was really good for self-protection in the beginning, but over time it was really suffocating. I want the end goal not to be that I stayed hidden, but that I was finally able to live fully and let go of my story and be able to transcend it.
and each person who speaks out inspires the next.
For me, I'm a rape survivor. After telling my story, a burden lifted, and for the first time, healing for me began. And I made the decision then that I was going to empower other women to come forward. So right now we are going after a national domestic worker bill of rights and doing some aggressive organizing.
Aggressive organizing is like apple picking for my family. I make them do it as often as they possibly can.
While June fights for the rights of domestic workers, journalists are exposing the systems behind the men exposing themselves.
In this country, we've got a gigantic underground system for paying women to keep these stories silent. Systemically, these stories get erased.
There were as many as 12 secret settlements that Weinstein had paid, and really no way for any of those women to know that they were one of 12. We want to expose the machinery that's been in place to silence women and basically continue to put them in harm's way.
So we're making progress, but the game's still rigged, and many survivors remain scared to speak out.
After I read my statement at the sentencing, I genuinely believed I had failed. It's only because it was released and people responded that I am here today. But there is a parallel universe that could have happened had people not been there, and that's what really continues to scare me.
And I think it's weird, given that we've all been talking about Me Too for 2 years, but there's not that much serious discussion of, say, federal sexual harassment laws are incredibly weak.
That's why it's important that we continue to fight so that not one woman, especially marginalized women, will be left behind.
These women are right. We need to demand change on a federal level. If only there was someone who knew how to activate millions of people.
Tarana, I'm so sorry. I didn't forget about you. I fixed you a plate.
Oh, thank you.
You got the crock. That's good luck. How do we keep this movement going forward in the right direction?
Well, I've started a new hashtag called MeTooVoter. We want a presidential candidate who will legislate to protect people from sexual violence and also provide resources for people who've experienced it. Nobody has spoken to that.
Really? Because that seems like something that Joe Biden would really like to grab by the shoulders and discuss intensely.
Don't get me started about Joe Biden, bless his heart.
Wait, do you really mean bless his heart, or do you mean something else?
While we're blessing their hearts, it'd be nice if they blessed us with some real leadership. Demand that candidates address sexual violence with the hashtag MeTooVoter.
Should we do it? Should we break the crack? Okay. Oh, you won. Make a wish. Are you making one?
Mm-hmm.
Is your wish that I was not making you do this?
Mm-hmm.
After a summer of uprisings calling to end police brutality, the call to defund police is also in our schools. Why? Because 47% of public schools have cops called SROs. And they're just like the police outside of schools. They have guns, can arrest, and often put black and brown children in dangerous and sometimes fatal situations.
First one officer, then two, appearing to body slam a 14-year-old.
When the deputy grabs and drags the student from her chair, you're done. You're done.
So I sat down with experts, educators, and even high schoolers to find out an answer to a very serious question.
What kind of bull is happening in schools?
I mean, it is nuts. We have to address the fact that our schools have become the locations for criminalization and not necessarily the locations for learning that we intend them to be.
And young people aren't happy with cops in schools either.
Every encounter I've had with a police officer has been bad. 5th grade was the first time I had multiple assault rifles pointed at me by an officer.
Damn.
So it's imperative that we get these officers out of our brown and black schools, because the same police officers harassing us in our neighborhoods are the same officers who are in our schools.
Are there any good reasons for SROs to be in schools? Take that as a no.
Dream's right, but only a few people are listening. So we're gonna take you back to your childhood and educate you the only way you used to learn anything. Schoolhouse Rock style. Cops in schools don't give black and brown kids any relief. Boom, 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 boom. That's why it's time to say, expel the police.
That was good, right? Why are there so many police officers in public school?
A lot of it had to do with
the Great Migration. Historically, when black people were fleeing the Jim Crow South and moving up north, there was a fear that black people were going to take over, and that's when you see more and more officers in schools.
Despite a long racist history, SROs really became prevalent in the 90s, presumably because Michelle Pfeiffer wasn't available to teach at every school.
We started to see more police in schools after the Gun-Free Schools Act in response to school shootings. But when we look at the data, it shows that the police were put in schools that were mostly black and brown.
But that doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to respond to mass shootings and say, let's put some SROs in the school, why are you putting them in schools where there aren't predominantly mass shootings?
Because there was an overarching idea that there were young people who needed to be controlled.
An idea that black and brown children are so inherently violent without police there, they would tear each other down.
And what do we call that, kids?
That's racist!
That's right. And in some instances, cops aren't making a difference in school shootings.
So what are they there for?
Cops in schools is really about the school to prison pipeline.
Hold on a second. There's going to be a lot of people watching this who are just
No
like,
doubt.
there is a pipeline?
Right. I mean, the school to prison pipeline is very real. It's just a myriad of policies like metal detectors, police presence, random searches, and then there's zero tolerance discipline policies. These demand that students get suspended and pushed out of the classroom. We know that when students are suspended, they're much more likely to end up in that prison cell.
When we talk about legacy admissions, this isn't what we had in mind. And these rules just don't result in suspensions. In some cases, because of police presence in schools, BIPOC students skip the pipeline altogether and go straight to jail. What part of the game is that?
There was a black student who was charged with a felony assault for discharging fart spray.
Ooh, say what?
I mean, it was a dumb thing to do, I'll give you that. Right?
It's a prank.
I mean, things that used to be solved by getting your parent called are now being handled by police.
And this dehumanization of young people leads to our erasure of their childhood, criminalizing them for normal adolescent behavior.
There was a 6-year-old girl who had a temper tantrum. A police officer handcuffed her, took her down to the juvenile detention center where he fingerprinted her, took her mug shot.
And she was 6?
6-year-old girl.
Come on. Thankfully, kids like Nathaniel are rewriting the narrative. He persuaded the Minneapolis School Board to cut ties with the police by collecting 1,800 signatures from his fellow students. That is a lot for a student to be doing right now.
Yeah, organizing is like, it's tiring.
It's not just like being on Twitter, it's like real work that you're doing?
Yeah.
Get this boy some rest. But the fight isn't over. That's why Dream is fighting to get them out of Chicago schools too.
Being oppressed will make you fight for your life. And that's what we are doing. We're fighting for our life. And if you do not believe in Black youth now, you're going to have another generation who will have to deal with all of this trauma. We know what we need, and that is resources, not to be policed.
Wow. Dream was preaching.
Well, them white people need to hear it.
White people need to hear a lot of things, like the fact that 14 million students are in schools that lack a counselor or nurse, but can still fund SROs.
And of course, when it comes to stuff like the budget, it's a really boring conversation, but it's like a budget is a moral document.
Yeah.
Money is being siphoned out of education and into prisons. You know, just a few blocks from where I teach, they built a $200 million jail for kids.
What?
If we had $200 million to invest in trauma counseling, in lowering class sizes, in mentorship, after school programs, we wouldn't have any kids in that jail because they would all be thriving.
We can do it. We've got to invest in it. I don't think that young people today are different than the young people of yesterday. If we invest in them with love, then we're investing in a society that I want to be a part of.
So class, what did we learn?
About the police!
And?
The police means voting education!
And?
You can't sing!
It's my favorite holiday, midterm election eve. I've got midterm fever so bad that I've got 2 shows next week. One on Monday to yell at you to vote, and one on Wednesday to yell at you for not voting. I'm just kidding. You're all gonna vote. You are all going to vote. This week has been one of the worst things I've ever seen, and that includes all these pictures of Chris Hardwick posing weird with his wife so no one notices he's shorter. Guess what, buddy? We noticed. In response to the anti-Semitic massacre in a Pittsburgh synagogue on Saturday, the White House was quick to denounce the hateful attacks on the true victim, our president.
The very first thing that the media did was condemn the president and go after and try to place blame, not just on the president, but everybody that works in this administration. And if anything, I think it is sad and divisive the way that every single thing that comes out of the media, 90% of what comes out of the media's mouths is negative about this president. Despite the fact that the economy is booming, despite the fact he said he would fix the trade deals.
Despite the fight? Oh my God, is Sarah Huckabee Sanders in a fable about what happens when you lie too much? Careful, little Sarah. If you twist the truth, the devil will twist your tongue. Trump and many other Republicans reacted to the shooting by condemning anti-Semitism. Always nice when we can agree that some hate crimes are bad, but the truth is, the Republican Party tolerates anti-Semitism and benefits from it. Mainstream conservatives would never say anything negative about Jewish people outright, but there are other words they use, like coastal elites, globalists, Hollywood liberals, or John Leibowitz. And currently, the biggest, loudest dog whistle is George Soros.
Democrats, George Soros.
George Soros. George Soros. George Soros.
George Soros.
George Soros.
Soros. Soros. Soros.
Soros. Soros.
George Soros.
Genuinely radical billionaire George Soros.
George Soros is genuinely radical? That just makes him sound cool as hell. Hang 10, Joso. George Soros is a billionaire investor and Jewish Holocaust survivor who created a charitable foundation called Open Society. But according to right-wing conspiracy theories, George Soros is a demonic, Nazi, commie supervillain who controls everything from world governments to when people poop. For real. A Campbell's Soup executive actually tweeted Open Society planned the migrant caravan, including where they defecate. Okay. First of all, as the purveyor of chunky sirloin burger soup, you are much more in control of where people defecate. Obviously, this guy doesn't control the world government. He can't even control his own under-eye bags. You can sleep a family in those things. The idea of Soros as puppet master was introduced into America's bloodstream back in 2010 by a dear, dear friend of the show.
If you skip past all of the puppets and the strings, if you stop looking at the puppets themselves, you have to see who's behind the puppets. Who is choosing the puppets and the players? Who's the puppet master? George Soros.
Who is behind the puppets? Who is the puppet master? Why do girls seem to lose interest in me once they've seen my massive puppet collection? This sleepy old Zadie is not a puppet master. He may be wealthy and influential, but he does not control the government, the weather, or anyone's poops, aside, I hope, from his own. But the idea of Jews as wealthy, scheming world dominators goes way back, farther than 2010. It's as old as Mike Pence thinks the Earth is. For example, everything people say about Soros was said before about Nathan Mayer Rothschild of the long demonized Rothschild banking family. Nathan was falsely accused of profiteering from Napoleon's bloody defeat at Waterloo, an utterly false smear that stuck to all European Jews for over 200 years. As we all know, the only people to have ever made bazillions off the Battle of Waterloo are ABBA. And so it went through the years. The czars of Russia, the Nazis, Richard Nixon, all of them found Soros-like Jewish figures to blame to consolidate their power and justify their behavior. Anti-Semitism isn't unique to the right, but right now it is shockingly mainstream in the Republican Party. Major elected officials drop dark Soros references constantly.
First off, do you believe George Soros is behind all of this, paying these people to get you and your colleagues in elevators or wherever they can get in your face?
I have heard so many people believe that. I tend to believe it.
They're called globalists. They like the globe. I like the globe too. I like the globe too, but we have to take care of our people. We have to. Globalists.
I can't help but think that the Democrats, perhaps Soros, others may be funding this.
And look at the background. George Soros is one of those people that actually helps, back these individuals.
Do you think George Soros funded the neo-Nazis who marched in Charlottesville?
Wouldn't it be interesting to find out?
You know you've got issues when you look at Nazis and go, seems Jewish. Unless you're thinking, hey, Maybe this is the harmless kind of ethnic hatred. Remember, a radicalized Trump supporter sent George Soros a bomb last week. When someone spouts this bullshit, it's not an accident, but it's especially not an accident if, in addition to the dog whistles, you have deep foghorns of hate. During the campaign, Donald Trump posted an anti-Semitic meme of a Star of David next to Hillary Clinton, and later, Sean Spicer did whatever this was.
Someone as despicable as Hitler, who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons.
Those comments sparking an immediate backlash. Hitler gassed millions of Jews in concentration camps during the Holocaust. That forcing Spicer to clarify before the briefing was over.
I think when you come to sarin gas, he was not using the gas on his own people the same way that Assad is doing. There was not he brought him into to the Holocaust Center. I understand that.
Spicer apparently referring to concentration camps when he used the term Holocaust Center.
Oh my God, can you believe that Sean Spicer is just out in the world right now eating mayonnaise with a spoon? By the way, I know Trump has a daughter who's Jewish. I forget her name. She's never really come up on the show. But that doesn't mean he can't be anti-Semitic. His daughter is also a woman, and he sure hates those. Scapegoating Jewish people is an ancient, horrible tradition, and it is happening in our country. Republicans didn't ask their supporters to take an AR-15 and massacre praying Jews, but Republicans were speaking a language that shooter heard loud and clear. He posted conspiracy theories about Soros on social media, just like politicians, soup bosses, and even the president have. Anti-Semitic violence and vandalism have surged since Trump's election, and they are not coming out of nowhere. Trump has whipped up a xenophobic mob, and xenophobic mobs don't traditionally make exceptions for Jewish people. Despite the fight that it hurts Republicans' feelings to hear that. We all remember the resistance against Trump's first Muslim ban. Just days after Trump took office, everyone with a hat and a ride to the airport was swept up in it.
You're looking at live protests tonight across America, protesting to the president's travel ban.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
Good evening, fellow SAG-AFTRA members and everyone at home, and everyone in airports that belong in my America.
I couldn't agree more with Ashton Kutcher, even though his America would just be one giant shopping mall that's all PacSuns. The dollar is dead, your new currency is Von Dutch hats. But unfortunately, unlike trucker hats, the Muslim ban is still a thing, and it's still causing a lot of misery. So tonight, let's return our attention to the ban, how it survived, and how it continues to be horrible in Full Frontal's Retro Rewind. Remember 2017? Apparently we do not, because the Muslim ban is still a thing. Gucci. You may remember that in 2017, the president's initial executive order to ban Muslims from entering the U.S. was blocked, but he kept trying, and like his marriages, the third time was the charm.
Today, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 along partisan lines to uphold the travel ban, or at least the third version of the travel ban.
The decision was 5-4, with the court's conservative majority upholding any president's wide authority over immigration.
5-4. Nice to know the question of who's allowed in America was swung by a Supreme Court justice who shouldn't have been allowed on the Supreme Court. So why did the court accept Muslim ban 3.0 faster than a USC accepts a millionaire's daughter? The White House argued its new and improved ban totally wasn't racist because it also banned a whopping 2 non-Muslim majority nations, including North Korea. That might sound great since it potentially meant we could ban the return of Dennis Rodman, but throwing in a couple non-Muslim countries doesn't make it not a Muslim ban. If a restaurant had a sign saying whites only and also no one with pollen allergies, that's not Jim Crow. But Trump's biggest selling point was his third order's waiver program. Basically, the White House convinced the Supreme Court that ban 3.0 wasn't anti-Muslim since it allowed anyone in, regardless of their race or creed or Muslimy-ishness, as long as they applied for a waiver. Unfortunately, the White House's robust waiver process is a fraud. For the first 5 months, waivers were issued at a rate of just 2%. The only robust thing about the waiver program is how taut Stephen Miller's neck frills get when he thinks about how many people it turns away. The ban is hurting hundreds of thousands of people who have done nothing wrong. Acceptance of refugees from Muslim-majority countries has dropped by 91%. The only thing that's dropped faster is Stephen Miller's body temperature when he sleeps on a cold rock at night. Students from countries affected by the travel ban can't go home or visit their families for fear they won't be readmitted to the U.S. And they actually want to see their families. They don't have an Uncle Ray shouting amen at the TV every time Hannity blorps out witch hunt. They can't leave the U.S. and their families can't enter, so there's nowhere where they can see each other. I mean, almost nowhere.
The Haskell Free Library was established more than 100 years ago, and it was deliberately built across the border, across the US-Canada border.
The place, by law, it's a neutralized area. It's not Canada, it's not US, or let's say it's both Canada and US. So both residents can go inside of the library without breaking any law.
Iranian families are now using the library to briefly reunite, like this PhD student who hadn't seen her parents in almost 3 years.
I was just hugging my parents. I can't explain how tough it was, especially about my dad. He started smelling me and he was like, I missed your smell. So
that must have been very moving for everyone except all the old people trying to search for porn on the library computers. The Muslim ban is even keeping married couples apart. A number of citizens of banned countries who are married to Americans have found themselves stranded outside the U.S., unable to reunite with their loved ones. Love torn apart by hate would be an amazing plot for a Nicholas Sparks book, but it is a horrible thing to happen to real people, and it gets worse. In one case, a 16-year-old bombing victim from Syria who had an appointment to meet with doctors in Boston about medical treatment was denied a visa because officials couldn't be sure she'd return to Germany. And honestly, why would you go back to Germany to be with your parents and 6 siblings, including a twin sister, when you can stay in beautiful, welcoming Boston? Look, I know it's hard to keep track of all the atrocities happening right now. It feels like every few days there's a new human rights abuse to be protesting. But we can't forget about the Muslim ban. We have to fight it as hard now as we did in 2017. Islamophobia is a global curse. It killed 50 people in New Zealand last week, and now it is enshrined in our own laws. So dust off your hat and dust off your Ashton Kutcher, because we have got more work to do. Many ICE detention centers are sequestered from civilization, seemingly to isolate detainees from the known world, to break their spirits and make them sign away their right to fight deportation. You know, the real American way. 150 miles away from Atlanta, you'll find the largest one in the country, Stewart Detention Center, which houses around 1,800 detainees. It's in Lumpkin, Georgia, where there's a gun shop, a library, and a single immigration lawyer.
Hi.
Are you the only lawyer for 1,800 people?
No.
Oh, thank God.
There's actually some nonprofit attorneys living in my backyard in a double wide trailer.
What? Detainees desperately need representation if they want any chance of being released. But about 1/3 of them are held more than 100 miles from the nearest legal aid. How many lawyers do you see representing detainees?
Yesterday, there were 137 cases on the docket, and I was the only attorney here physically.
Marty, you're doing some good work.
Thank you.
This is like the first time in my life I'm stumped for a lawyer joke. Oh, I got one. Okay. What do you call 100 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean?
What?
A shame, because their services are critically needed in Lumpkin. But a lawyer isn't all you need. This is Pedro Guzman. He was brought to the U.S. as a kid, but in 2009 was scooped up by ICE and spent 19 months at Stewart until his deportation order was canceled. How was your case different?
My wife was, pretty much at every hearing I was in.
If you don't have someone working on the outside in town, what are your chances of getting out?
Probably 0.
Pedro's wife made countless 8-hour drives to Lumpkin, but when she got there, she faced a different problem.
There are no facilities like hotels in the town of Lumpkin.
There is El Refugio, a hospitality house that provides a free place to stay for families and visiting lawyers, but it's always full.
It's a very tiny house, as you can see. 3 bedrooms. We have 9 beds, 1 bathroom.
9 beds here. There's 1,800 beds over there. That ratio seems racist to me. This town needs more lawyers. These detainees need their families, and there's no more room at the inn. Oh, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, I just had a Christmas-gasm. Maybe I can fix this on Book It or Leave It. I'll tell you what we need. We need a house so that El Refugio can accommodate more lawyers and more family members, but we don't need anything fancy. I'd love it if there were French doors.
There aren't a lot of options available.
Really high ceilings.
There's only really one house.
A Polynesian theme for the grotto.
This is basically your only option.
Sold. Do you take this?
Sure.
Oh. This is a chip card. Is this a chip reader?
It is,
just
yeah.
Insert it here?
You do, yeah, just at the bottom there.
Okay.
Make sure it clicks. Yep.
Okay, it's not reading it. We bought a house for El Refugio. Seriously, we bought it for them. They needed it. It was a bit of a fixer-upper, so we got busy with the renovations. And then it was time for the big reveal. Ta-da! Oh my God, get out of there. What do you get? Go on. Ta-da. Welcome to your new house. I did a little stock modeling in the early aughts. There's a fully redone kitchen to feed all those pro bono lawyers, a dining room that seats 20 for fueling up so they can fight our draconian immigration policies, 19 beds for, damn it, sandwich guy! And a beautiful living space to help them forget the Death Star is a mile away. What do you think, guys? Are you gonna lumpkin or leave it?
Well, we're gonna lumpkin.
Oh, yeah, I was going for something. Okay, so you're gonna take it?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
All right. Well, cheers. It's already up and running. Look, we weren't able to fix our Kafka-esque immigration system, but hopefully we did make one little tiny part of it slightly more bearable. If you liked this video, hit subscribe and leave a pleasant comment below. Let's ride out the rest of this nightmare year together, okay? Okay? All right.